My name is Kaylee Sinkson and I'm presenting on the play Yerma. Yerma was written by the notable playwright and poet Frederico del Sagrado Corazón de Jesús Garcia Lorca. His works are the most frequently translated works in Spain. He was born near Granada in Fuente Vaquero, Spain, which is to the south, to a prosperous farm owner and pianist. He was described as a rich boy in a little village. Unfortunately, he died at the young age of 38. Lorca began his writing career after he had quit law school with Impresiones y Paisajes, Impressions and Landscapes, and continued to do other volumes of poetry. Lorca's two most successful poetry collections were Canciones, which is songs, published in 1927, and Romancero Gitano, the Gypsy Ballads, published in 1928. Romancero Gitano explored sexual themes and was very daring for the time, making Lorca very notable. In the 1930s, Lorca spent most of his time working on plays, like Bodas de Sangre, which is Blood Wedding, in 1933, Yerma, which is what I'm presenting on, in 1934, and La Casa de Bernarda Alba, which is The House of Bernarda Alba, in 1936. When he was going to school, this is where he met Salvador Dali, and they became close acquaintances. He was also a group called the Generation of 27, which introduced Lorca to Surrealism, which is also what Salvador Dali is known for. You can think of the dripping clock. That is what Surrealism is. It was an influential group of poets that arose in Spanish literary circles between 1923 and 1927, essentially out of a shared desire to experience and work with avant-garde forms of art and poetry. As an article from The Independent explains, for decades, Spain's literary establishment and even his own family refused to acknowledge that the country's best-loved poet, Frederico Garcia Lorca, was gay. When he moved to Madrid, Lorca met Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, and it was reported that he had both an artistic and romantic relationship with them. There's a very famous quote from Salvador Dali after Lorca had died when he was being interviewed by a French guy named Alain Bosquet. In the interview, this is a direct quote from Dali, "He was homosexual, as everyone knows, and madly in love with me. He tried to screw me twice. I was extremely annoyed because I wasn't homosexual and I wasn't interested in giving in. Besides, it hurts, so nothing came of it." He then states that he eventually bagged a young girl and she replaced me in the sacrifice. Failing to get me to put my ass at his disposal, he swore that the girl's sacrifice was matched by his own. It was the first time he had ever slept with a woman. Dali was well known that he didn't like being touched, so this may have been very uncomfortable for him. Despite the threat of a growing fascist movement in Spain, Lorca didn't hide his leftist political views or his homosexuality and continued writing. Lorca was taken, along with 3 other men, to an olive grove near the village of Alfacar, and soldiers shot them before throwing their bodies in an unmarked grave. Lorca's biographer stated that his homosexuality brought an additional thrill to his assassins, and it was suggested they made comments about it after he was murdered. To this day, his remains haven't been found, and they're still undergoing investigation into Lorca's, as well as hundreds of other people who were shot and who they think are buried with them. Lorca wrote Yerma in 1934, and it first performed that same year. Lorca describes the play as a tragic poem. The play tells a story of a childless woman living in rural Spain who really wants to be a mother and eventually kills her husband after he tells her to give up after years of trying. Her name is the feminine version of the adjective yermo, meaning barren. Yerma deals with the themes of isolation, passion, and frustration, but also themes of nature, marriage, jealousy, and friendship. Social conventions of the period also play a large part in the play. It has since been adapted in 2016 by Australian playwright Simon Stone and premiered at the Young Vic starring Billie Piper. Next year, the show went on to New York City, and both times it received rave reviews and many awards went to both the revival and to Piper's performance. Hollywood Reporter found her simply staggering, adding, "When the actress appears at the curtain call, looking emotionally and physically exhausted, you find yourself relieved that she's okay and concerned that she'll have to do it all over again the next night. And that's